Hey guys, welcome back. In the era of modern boomer shooters, everyone knows that there's one true king. When id Software rebooted Doom in 2016, they managed to strike a perfect balance between what some would consider modern expectations for a first-person shooter with retro FPS elements, creating a game that almost nobody dislikes. And then they went and did it again with Doom Eternal in 2020. But over 2 years have passed since Doom Eternal released, and since I last played it as well. And in that time, 2 story DLCs have released, the Ancient Gods. So, with my favourite boomer shooter currently shooting itself in the foot with 7 BFGs, it's not actually a boomer shooter, it's just a shooter played by boomers. Like me. I thought it was time to return to Doom Eternal and experience the Ancient Gods for the first time. Yes, I can confirm that I am indeed filling the Halo Story DLC void with Doom Story DLC, okay? Don't judge me, I think we're all in the same spot right now. So, it's time to reawaken the Slayer one final time. It's Doom time, baby! So, Ancient Gods Part 1, the first of 2 DLCs. I'm not gonna lie, this is the first time that I'd played Doom in well over a year, at least properly, so at first, I admit I played a little bit like a games journalist. The gameplay at first was not great for me, but not even my garbage initial gameplay could distract me from just how damn good the overall presentation of this DLC and the next one were going to be. Right from the get-go, the overall presentation of the Atlantica facility is absolutely fantastic. The cinematography, framing of the cutscenes, sound, and music design all feel like they're working in tandem to create something larger than what we're seeing here. One of the strengths of these story expansions for me were how well they set up and also dove into the wider Doom universe, something that Doom Eternal had already started, but these DLCs really go in on. But the first thing that came back to me as soon as I got control of the Slayer once again is just how fucking good this game's gameplay really is. Not only is it turbo fast-paced, smooth, aggressive, and fittingly violent, but it's also designed really intelligently. Your 3 main resources are armor, health, and ammo, and the game ensures that all 3 can be replenished through violence and violence alone. Flamethrowing your enemies replenishes armor. Glory killing them replenishes health. Chainsawing them replenishes ammo. All 3 seamlessly integrate into the combat loop, creating a gloriously smooth flow of violence that feels cinematic without ever relinquishing you of control. Both Ancient Gods Part 1 and 2 add new mechanics that only serve to bolster this as well, but we'll touch on those when they arise. Although early on I do have to mention a criticism that I noticed pretty early on in Ancient Gods Part 1. It's far more prevalent in Part 1 than Part 2, but I just felt like the length of some of the encounters was far too long. Some of the arenas just seemed to take way too long to complete. It felt like enemies were just never gonna stop spawning. Now, as I just outlined only a few seconds ago, I think Doom Eternal has absolutely fucking excellent gameplay. I absolutely love it. But when you're stuck in relentless, super fast-paced combat for 5, 10, 15 minutes without any kind of breather, you start to get combat fatigue, and that's something that I really started to notice, in particular at the start of Ancient Gods Part 1. Irrespective of how satisfying the gameplay and combat loop is, if that's all you're experiencing, and almost nothing else for 10 plus minutes on end, then it just starts to get a little bit tiring. I felt like Doom 2016 and Vanilla Doom Eternal did a great job at breaking up the combat pacing with the quieter sections where, for example, you were looking for a keycard or a door or taking in the environment, or, for example, Doom Eternal even went as far as adding entire platforming sections that were like very retro and vintage styled that I really liked to break up the pacing and ensure that combat wasn't all you were doing. But early on in Ancient Gods, it kind of just feels like that was forgotten. It's just combat arena after combat arena after combat arena with next to no breaks in between. It even got to the point where I was willing the next area to be a platforming room over and over. I'd go through a door after one fight section, be like, please let this be a platforming section. But when those platforming sections did come, I loved them. I adored them, in fact. Like many elements of vanilla Doom Eternal, Ancient Gods expands on the platforming, adding new mechanics, integrating elements of the weapon sandbox like the meat hook, and often dedicating entire rooms to puzzles and unique platforming setups. Personally, I love any game that tries to do this. I think it's partly the Resident Evil fan in me. So when Doom did it with Eternal, I loved it, and now that the Ancient Gods have expanded on it, I love it even more. And on the topic of expanding vanilla elements of Doom Eternal, swimming. Sadly, this was only really a thing early on in part 1 and a little bit in part 2 as well. I think broadly speaking, it was very underutilized, but I love the new kinds of areas that being able to swim opened up, and also the attention to detail was great. I did not expect this shark to do anything, but lo and behold, I swam up to it and it took a bite out of the Slayer. That is some very, very protein-rich meat, let me tell you. And speaking of attention to detail, coming back to Doom Eternal reminded me just so much of how much thought id Software put into just the overall experience of this game, even down to what seemed like small and gimmicky features, like, for example, render modes. Now, I can't remember if these were always a thing in Doom Eternal or if they were added with one of the DLCs, but being able to simulate your game running as a VHS, like an OG console, or like an old dot matrix PC CRT monitor, or even like a super retro handheld console is so cool and very fitting given Doom's legacy. I just love that id deemed it necessary to spend resources on a feature as minor and seemingly insignificant as this. I think that kind of shows where the studio's priorities are at when developing Doom games, and it's something that I really, really appreciate. It feels like in modern gaming, a lot of those quirky, small, and mostly unused mechanics and features are kind of just glossed over for bigger picture things, and they're not really deemed like necessary to spend resources on, so the fact that it did, I love it. Now, I guess now is a better time than ever to start talking about the Ancient Gods plotline. Now, as usual with Doom, this isn't exactly a Halo or Metal Gear Solid style narrative. It's not anything similar to those. The main focus is, of course, on slaughtering demons in the millions, and the narrative of Ancient Gods actually understands that and revolves around that in its entirety. However, for the final time. Following Hell's conquering of the Maker Holy Realm of Urdak, the demons now threaten to invade every dimension imaginable, and so, it's the Slayer's task to stop them, once and for all. In doing so, you team up with the Seraphim, a Maker who acted as the guardian of the Doomslayer, and the one who, supposedly, originally gave him his powers, and also who helped the Father, who was essentially God, supposedly again, who would later be semi-reborn as the Slayer's AI, Vega, originally defeat the forces of Hell, led by an individual named Davoth, aka the Dark Lord. Early on in part 1, you rescue the Seraphim from the Atlantica facility, and it turns out that he and Samuel Hayden, the head of the UAC, are in fact the same entity, which was a twist that I really liked because it made perfect sense considering he was the head of the UAC, right? The UAC, an organization renowned for its exploitation of Hell's resources, and that had a repertoire of Hell artifacts. Hayden, or I guess Samur Maker as he's really called, sends you to retrieve the life sphere of the Father so that we can essentially resurrect God into a physical form to reclaim Urdak and stop the demons. And it's here where we get into the second part of Act 1 of Ancient Gods, which I personally found so much more enjoyable than part 1. This is going to be a bit of a recurring theme throughout this video, but I love the aesthetic of this chapter. The blood swamps look so good. Very sickly, grimy, and ancient feeling. And also, the pacing of the level itself was so much better. I never felt any combat fatigue because the platforming sections were longer, required more thought than part 1, and were also greater in number, and what I'm going to coin radiation encounters were added as well to make you kind of play the regular arena encounters in ways that weren't just roam around this arena and kill everything you see. I liked how these radiation zones had you moving between specific confined areas. It made the gameplay a lot more tense, not knowing what was going to walk through the radiation into your safe haven. One of the DLC's many new enemies gets introduced here as well. The Spirit, an enemy that you can't just shoot for the first time in Doom. No. This enemy requires a special touch to take down, which again is quite a trend for these DLCs. Initially, the spirit spawns inside another enemy, making them really powerful and immune to weak shots, and once you kill that enemy, the spirit pops out, but you can only kill it with the plasma rifle's microwave beam, which I'm convinced has to be a Ghostbusters reference. I refuse to believe that this is not a Ghostbusters reference. I mean, come on. I really like the fact that to take these things down, you have to specifically use one rather niche and I would say mostly unused tool, and also, like I said, they aren't the first new enemy in the DLCs to do that. Chapter 2 rounds out with a very unique boss fight, the Trial of Malagog, a massive demonic companion cube that you have to shoot in the eye, and that incorporates an element used in the game's puzzles to deal proper damage to it. You've got to punch it into this massive, really cool ancient shield. Now, as much as I did like this fight, it does highlight an issue that I have with modern Doom, and it's an issue that I've had for quite a few years now. Tooltips. Now, this might sound crazy, right? Just hear me out. I always feel really pulled out of the game when right before I'm about to fight a new enemy or a boss or something, a mid-2000s style pop-up window comes up with literally an I understand box at the bottom center of it that just tells me in plain text what I need to do to defeat it. I really wish that id would use contextual cues in the enemy or the environment itself to try and teach you an enemy's mechanics and weak spots, etc. I mean, I think of all the franchises and games out there, Doom would probably be one of the easiest to do that. I mean, hell, Call of Duty Zombies can do that with its bosses. If Call of Duty Zombies can do that, then I have no doubt that Doom can do. It always just feels very immersion breaking having that pop-up window come up. I feel like I've left my ad blocker off or something and I'm having like I said, early 2000s style pop-ups come up. Man, the next thing is going to be the Slayer's Praetor armor getting filled with toolbars. Please no. But regardless, I thought the Trial of Malagog was a pretty fun boss fight, and it ends with a really fun cutscene. A Titan demon personally lifting the Slayer up to the Father's life sphere to reform him, only for the Slayer to destroy the life sphere and instead claim the life sphere of something else. The Dark Lord, the ruler of all hell itself. This was so Doomslayer, but actually, you know what, canonically, it makes sense. Resurrecting the Father would help defeat the demons in Urdak, but he was the one who originally spared the Dark Lord's life sphere, choosing to store it instead, which is why the demons still exist and can still invade places like Urdak. If the Dark Lord is destroyed, and granted that is a big if, then so too are all the demons, which means that none of this can happen again. And the Slayer knows that, realistically, if anyone can defeat the Dark Lord once and for all, it's gonna be him, right? So this is pretty much humanity's best shot at putting an end to the demons once and for all. Essentially turning on the Seraphim, his only ally in this battle, the Slayer returns to his carrier, where only one Chad stays behind after seeing the Dark Lord's life sphere. Intern. This Sigma is the only one who doesn't flee. Instead, he chooses to stay behind and aid the Slayer in reaching Urdak and activating the sphere to resurrect the Dark Lord. It's clear that this dude is a Turbo Slayer fanboy, and honestly, I feel like it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing. I feel like he's almost meant to be like an in-game representation of us, the Doom fans, because realistically, anybody who's a Doom fan is also a Doom Slayer fanboy, so I like that little like kind of tongue-in-cheek characterization right there.
All right, ready for launch, Doom guy. I'm sorry.
The Chad intern then gets us to an area of Urdak called the Holt, and I'm sorry, but I've got to say it again, I love this place's aesthetic. It's such a cool blend of that organic Doom gore, with alien plants and bushes scattered throughout, and a littering of holy maker holograms. From the holy towering white trees to the regal gold bars and dainty gold holograms and sigils that emerge from the ground, it's clear that this now hell-consumed area was once one of immense natural beauty and importance, ruled by a species far beyond our own. Now this is a pretty standard level, all the way up until the end to be honest with you, but we do get introduced to another new enemy throughout, the Bloodmaker. Now I gotta say, again, for the billionth time in this video, I love the design of these guys. They have a real kind of weaponized fallen angel vibe to them, especially with how they wield and fight with their spears, but their mechanics are very simple and I think could have been a little bit more fleshed out. They're invincible until they charge up an attack, and then they're weak to headshots. Like, so weak that you can one-tap them, which I thought was, I don't know, they could have been a little bit better. But going back to the design, I'm just going to touch on the maker design overall real quick, because I absolutely love it. They have such a 90s FPS alien aesthetic to them. Like, they literally look like they've been plucked right out of a 90s Doom game, or hell, even like Marathon, for example. They look a lot like the compilers from Bungie's Marathon that later went on to inspire the Guardians in Halo 3. Anyway, enough fanboying, because we're getting to the end of part 1 of Ancient Gods. We're at the end of chapter 3 now, and boy does this thing end with a good boss fight. The Seraphim. You reach the Luminarium, where the Dark Lord's life sphere would be activated, but are confronted by a demonically corrupted Seraphim who looks incredible and also happens to have a fantastic boss fight as well. It's a multi-stage boss fight filled with shitloads of demons, rising platforms, natural hazards in the form of pools of toxic electrified liquid, and of course, lasers, and a boss fight that absolutely keeps you on your toes. The whole fight flowed really nicely and also incorporated various new mechanics that have been taught to you throughout part 1 of the DLC. And then you combine that with Doom Eternal's already god-tier gameplay, and man, what a fight. My favourite boss fight in Doom, full stop, to be honest with you. And also, to top it off, it ends with a fantastic cutscene.
It is not required that you end his life. Your mission here is now your own.
Entering the Luminarium, the Slayer activates the Dark Lord's life sphere, revealing himself. It's so fitting that the strongest warrior in Hell's history is Hell's very own Slayer, one created by the Father to be essentially a god in and of itself, and meant to rule over a realm full of individuals gifted with ambition and a lack of restraint. Pure, untamed power, aka the Slayer. And part 2 opens as strong as it possibly could do. The Slayer is stood before his hellborn doppelganger. A rock and a hard place meeting. But they can't fight just yet. No blood can be spilt in the Luminarium. So the Dark Lord beckons the Slayer to come and fight him at the capital of Hell, Imora. We then get transported by the Dark Lord himself to Argent D'Nur, one of my favourite areas from the main campaign, the home of the Sentinels. Man, I was so happy to revisit this place. I loved it in the main campaign, and I gotta say, it was so refreshing to see an almost like Pacific Northwest inspired biome here in a Doom game with demons. Visually, it was very refreshing, and the same goes for the kind of medieval-esque villages that you fight through as well. But these areas were great for platforming as well. The verticality of the village integrated so well into jump puzzles, with more areas on the rooftops opening up the further you progressed. And you know what, on that note, Ancient Gods Part 2 really goes hard with the puzzles and platforming sections, and it even adds new mechanics, like finally being able to use the meat hook on surfaces other than demons, which was something that I'd wanted to do since we first saw Doom Eternal gameplay all the way back in whatever the hell year it was, a long time ago. I really hope whatever comes next for Doom continues to integrate platforming and puzzles like this. The game's movement and sandbox are absolutely perfect for it, and this DLC just proves that. Now, one thing that I did begin to miss, more so for its aesthetic over its functionality throughout these DLCs, was the Crucible, the sword that we got in the regular campaign. Now, obviously, we kind of left it in the Icon of Sin's brain, so we couldn't really take it into this DLC. But here, we get introduced to something even better, the Sentinel Hammer, handed to us by Valen the Betrayer himself, and I gotta say, I think this thing is so much more fun to use than the sword. The sword was really just a one-hit kill melee weapon, albeit a pretty cool one, right? But it was just a one-hit kill melee weapon. Mechanically, functionally, it was kinda meh. The Sentinel Hammer, on the other hand, is meant to be used in conjunction with other attacks to provide tons of a certain resource. If you ice grenade an enemy and then slam the hammer down, you get tons of health, or if you set them on fire, you get armor. And on top of that, it stuns enemies, or prolongs their stuns if they're already stunned, to make for some easy hits to get in. Very useful for Marauders in particular. You can also level up the Sentinel Hammer by doing special encounters throughout the game, which I was a little bit disappointed by, to be honest with you, because the upgrades didn't really change it functionally. They were just like, oh, you get more resources from it, or you get to stun the enemies for longer. It wasn't anything that interesting. I don't know, pipe dream, but I was hoping like you'd get all of them, and at the end, like at the end for the last boss fight, you'd have like dual wielded Sentinel Hammers or something. I don't know, maybe that's pushing the boat out a little bit too much, but I was hoping those upgrades would be something a little cooler. But either way, the Sentinel Hammer was fantastic. And then another new enemy comes into the fray, the Stone Imp. Now, at first I thought these guys would just be pretty simple, but then, of course, I read their 2005 Windows XP pop-up and I was like, oh, damn. These guys are going to breathe new life into two elements of the sandbox that are completely neglected. The Imp and the combat shotgun. Typically, at least in my playthroughs, the Imp only really exists to be chainsawed in half when I'm running low on ammo, and the combat shotgun exists to take up an inventory space. Realistically, why would I ever use the combat shotgun over the super shotgun? Come on. Well, to take the Stone Imp down, you have to use the full auto mod on the combat shotgun, or risk them Droideka rolling into you. I'm not kidding. These guys literally roll like Droidekas, which is pretty dope. At no point, though, does the invulnerability to other weapons or melee attacks or anything of the Stone Imps ever become annoying. At first, I was a little bit concerned that it might do, but it really doesn't. It just, like the Spirit, forces you to use a slightly neglected part of the sandbox. After fighting through snowy mountaintops, the Slayer gets a dragon. Yep. A dragon, of course he does. Hell, I ain't complaining. Which he uses to reach and light the Torch of Kings, rallying any remaining Night Sentinels in Argent D'Nur to lead one final assault on Hell.
The corrupted priests forbid the use of this beacon. If there are any remaining free tribes left in Argent D'Nur, all will see this light and know what your mission is here.
But to reach Imora, we have to return to Earth first and access something called the Gate of Devum. And man, I'm gonna say it again, the aesthetic and look of the overall level of Reclaimed Earth, whew, that sunset with the demons and the overgrown city, such a cool vibe. I loved it. However, quite early on in this level, I was taken away from the comfy sunset and the comfy trees and stuff of Reclaimed Earth to get an overwhelming sense of dread when I read this pop-up. I thought that this cursed prowler was going to be awful. When I first read this and read that when one of these bastards hits you, you can no longer jump or dash and your health begins to drain, I immediately got Nam flashbacks to the EMP zombies from Advanced Warfare Zombies. If anyone played that mode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They were the bane of my existence whenever I played that because they just destroyed the combat pacing. You were so used to this style of advanced movement and having the ability to, in zombies for example, jetpack and jump everywhere, and as soon as one of them hit you, you couldn't do that anymore. And that's kind of the case with this. Like, with how fast-paced Doom Eternal's gameplay is, you're constantly double jumping and thrusting everywhere. And having that taken away at first feels quite janky and like it really damages the pacing of the game, but when you realize that the way that you get them back is very simple, it's not too bad. To remove the curse, you simply have to blood punch the prowler that cursed you, and considering that as soon as you're cursed, your blood punch meter instantly fills up to the full, and your target also has a waypoint over their head, they really aren't as annoying as they first seem. Thank God, because these guys could have really damaged this game's gameplay, but they don't. On the way to the Gate of Devum, you go through yet more absolutely fantastic platforming sections. Seriously, have I mentioned how much I like the platforming in Doom Eternal yet? Because, man, I love the platforming in Doom Eternal. When we pass through the very cool looking Gate of Devum on Earth and reach Imora, arguably the coolest Doom Eternal cutscene, or Doom cutscene full stop, begins. The Slayer, facing off against the Dark Lord in his tower, with both titans backed up by vast armies of their own forces in infantry form, soldier form, demon form, mech form, titan form, artillery form, ship form, and more. This cutscene straight up gave me chills when I first saw it. Seeing the Slayer fighting alongside Valen, the Betrayer, who's leading all the remaining Night Sentinels once again into the heart of hell where all of this began. Oh my god, what a fantastic way to spark the beginning of the end of the Slayer's journey. And I'm not gonna lie, this cutscene made me even happier that I chose to do Ancient Goddess Part 2 in the original 2016 Praetor suit. It just made that intro cutscene feel even more epic than it already was. But it doesn't end with a cutscene. No. As soon as you're in gameplay, again, you're surrounded by this ensuing war. Demons and Night Sentinels slaughtering each other one final time. And hell, we even get to see a demonic titan fighting a massive arc mech in the background. And I'm not gonna lie, I sat there for a solid minute or two just watching these guys go back and forth with each other. This all sets up such a great sense of finality for the entire modern Doom story. As we reach and begin to ascend the Dark Lord's tower, we encounter armoured barons for the first time, which I thought looked really cool actually. They kind of look like Doom's version of the DB mechs from Gears 4 and 5. Strange collaboration there, I know, but it's the first thing that came to mind. They are essentially cybernetic mechanized barons armed with a flail on their right hand that acts both as their weapon and also one of their weak spots. As is the trend with these DLCs, new enemies typically require a specific mechanic to be taken out, and so do these mechanized barons. To destroy the armor on one of these, you can either shoot the flail when it's charging up, or you can quite literally melt its armor with a plasma rifle, which I thought was really satisfying. And then you just finish it off like you would any demon, but if you leave it too long, then its armor can kind of respawn in a way, regrow, reform. I don't know what the right term is there. It gets its armor back, you know what I'm talking about. But the North Star of all of this is the final boss fight against the Dark Lord. And before you even get into the arena, you're greeted with such a cool cutscene of the Slayer ascending the tower, riding ships, grappling off cacodemons and imps before landing at his destination. Honestly, I will never get tired of watching the Slayer do cool shit like that. I would honestly watch like a 10-hour montage of him just doing shit like that all day, and that would be a fantastic Doom experience for me. I'd be perfectly happy. But on the flip side, I'm gonna be honest, the final boss fight I thought was a little bit of a letdown. Don't get me wrong, the build-up, the atmosphere, the theming, all were absolutely top notch. It all had such a great sense of finality, considering if the Slayer wins this fight, then all demonic threats in existence that we've been fighting for the last god knows how many years will just simply cease to exist. This is the end of everything that's been set up since the Slayer awoke from his tomb all the way back in 2016, and everything drives that point home besides the combat of the fight itself. Now, I know that this fight is meant to be a ritualistic one, I believe is the terminology they use, so I assume it's just meant to be between these two adversaries with nothing else intervening, no Night Sentinels, no demons, no mechs or titans, but the fight itself it felt so quiet. The Dark Lord fights in a mech with a crucible and essentially acts as a turbo version of the Marauder, which I think is really cool. But the arena itself just feels so empty because there's no other demons spawning alongside him. I can't help but feel like the Seraphim's fight just felt so much more climactic in its pacing and its content. I mean, dude, that arena was packed full of demonic threats, even to a point, maybe a little bit too packed, but it gave it such a great sense of finality. But here, it's just the Slayer and the Dark Lord, with, of course, the occasional spirits of demons that the Dark Lord summons that really only exist to give you charges for your Sentinel Hammer. I don't know, it just felt like, considering what was at stake with this fight, and especially considering the full-scale war that was going on all around us, there should have been more going on in this arena, but honestly, regardless of all that, I did still enjoy the fight. It just wasn't as climactic as I was hoping it was going to be. Like I said, the Dark Lord's mech has a lot of mechanic similarity with the Marauder, but by now, you're well versed at killing. I mean, hell, there's quite a few encounters in this DLC, and the last one, that have you fighting 2 Marauders and other demons at the same time. Honestly, those guys are kind of a cakewalk now. I'm pretty much used to them, so fighting an almost more powerful version of the Marauder, in the form of the Dark Lord, was very cool. And finally bringing down your Hellborn doppelganger was incredibly satisfying, I'll be honest. Even more so when you experience his final words, and more so, the Slayer's retort to them.
Tell me, have you nothing to say to your creator before you strike him down? No.
With Davoth, the Dark Lord defeated, so too are all the demons, and the demonic threat forever vanquished. But that comes with a catch. You see, throughout the fight, it's actually revealed that the Seraphim and Father lied to us. The Father did in fact not create all life. It was Davoth that did so, and thus the divinity machine, which was used by the Seraphim to grant the Slayer his immense power, was also created by Davoth. And seeing as it was one of his creations, something happens. I'm not 100% sure on the semantics, but something happens either with that machine or between Davoth and the Slayer essentially falls down unconscious, before once again being placed in a tomb by the Makers, sealed, ready to be awoken when the next threat arrives, just as he was in the beginning.
Brutal, without mercy, but you will be worse. Rip and tear until it is done.
I do love it when stories come full circle like this. And as the tomb is closed, so too is the Doomslayer's story. At least for now. You see, after the fight, after the final cutscene, we get one screen with a quote from one of the books of Hell. May the blood on your sword never dry, and may we never need you again. Karak's entry, 717. So, if we just do some simple math real quick, 7 add 17 is 2024, right? So Doom 2016 came out in Shock Horror 2016, Doom Eternal came out 4 years later in 2020, and so if we move 4 years forward after 2020, what is it? 2024. I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing the Slayer again in 2024. Fingers crossed that's not me going crazy, trying to pick at numbers and patterns that don't actually exist, and fingers crossed that is when we get the sequel to Doom Eternal, because, man, I need some more Slayer. I really hope that the makers are waiting until 2024 to wake him up, because I need more Slayer. And so, that is the Ancient Gods DLC for Doom Eternal. The end of the Doom Slayer's story. At least for now. It wasn't perfect by any means, but I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoyed playing through it. I thought it was a fantastic continuation and end of the Slayer's story. Something that was really refreshing to see was the aesthetic variety of the levels. I feel like a lot of the times, story expansions suffer from being almost entirely based in maybe one or two pre-existing level styles, or reusing aesthetics too much from the main game, to the point of making those expansions not really feel that new. But both Part 1 and Part 2 of Ancient Gods just went above and beyond in crafting new locations and aesthetics, whilst to be fair, also still reusing the odd one from the main game to make sure they feel so new and fresh, but with a little touch of familiarity in there as well. The perfect combination. To be honest, they really didn't feel like DLCs to me. Rather, they kind of just felt like launch quality campaigns just released after the fact, which is a pretty high accolade, I'm not gonna lie. Despite a bit of a slow and tedious start, the gameplay was just fantastic, as expected, really. It was fleshed out in new and very much appreciated ways, and the story also ended in a great way as well that's just got me hankering to see what comes next. What's the Slayer gonna do next? Is he gonna wake up? Is he gonna have a really long nap? I don't know, but I want to know. I cannot wait to see what id Software do with Doom next. I just hope that whatever that thing is, it includes the Slayer, because man, if not, if he stays in that tomb having a really, really long nap, then I am gonna miss him so much. And so, that does it for my return to Doom Eternal. Something that I am very, very happy that I did, because it's kind of just reawoken my love for this game and this franchise, and I can't wait to see what we get next. Fingers crossed we get a surprise announcement of whatever comes after Doom Eternal at E3 next year. Given that, based on my very basic predictions, we may be getting it in 2024, that would make sense to get it announced next year, so my fingers are crossed with the power of 1 million makers and a billion slayers, or something like that. My fingers are just really, really crossed, okay? Really, really crossed. And so, with that said, I'm going to round this branch out video out here. I want to give a massive thank you to the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Installation 00 for becoming a new iconic one over on Patreon. Dude, thank you very, very much. If you somehow haven't checked out Installation 00's channel yet, then A, what are you doing? And B, click the link in the description to go and do it. Please, go and drop him a sub. If you somehow haven't already, just please go and do it. So yeah, thank you very much. And also, thank you to all of my other patrons as well. Thank you all for the support. I really appreciate it. And thank you all once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this branch out video. Many more to come. Got a lot planned right now that I'm really excited to make. I'm sure you guys can guess what a few of them are. So yeah, I'm going to stop waffling and round this video out so I can get to work on them. So thank you all once again for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you all in the next one.